My name is April Jones. I'm 29 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought love was something you could build if you worked hard enough, if you gave enough, forgave enough, and planned enough for the future you believed you both wanted. That belief was the foundation beneath every decision I'd made for the past year, especially the 3-week Europe trip I'd spent 12 months saving and 6 months planning right down to the last dinner reservation. I had just opened the booking page for our final night in Paris, a tiny romantic restaurant my boyfriend Evan had pinned on Pinterest, when I heard his laughter drift in from the living room. It wasn't a laugh I recognized. It had an effortless, buoyant quality I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Curious, I muted my mic, ready to unmute again after a moment. But I never spoke. I just listened. Dude, Tyler, I know. 2 more weeks of pretending to be excited about museums, and her boring, color-coded spreadsheet life, he said. His voice was bright conspiratorial, as if he were sharing a joke about a stranger. My hand stilled over the trackpad. At first I thought I misheard him. Then he kept going. It's a 3-week, all-expenses-paid Europe trip. First-class hotels, flights, the works. I'm not stupid. I've earned this. He said it so casually, as if the time, money, and sacrifices I had poured into this trip belonged to him by default. I'd taken extra freelance clients, skipped vacations, and saved every spare dollar just to make this experience possible. I thought I was building something for us. He thought he'd earned a reward. Tyler said something I couldn't quite make out, and Evan responded with a tone I had never heard directed toward me. The second we get home, done. I've already got my stuff half packed at my mom's. April is clueless, so desperate to make this perfect. She won't see it coming. The words hit me with a cold heaviness, like stepping into deep water without realizing the drop was there, but he wasn't finished. God, no, he scoffed, reacting to something Tyler asked. Olivia has actual ambition, a vibe. She doesn't plan spontaneity, she lives it. Once I get those Paris and Italy photos, Liv and I are going to Miami. That's a real vacation. Olivia. The woman from his fitness studio. The one he assured me was just a friend, the one who commented under all his posts with flaming hearts and inside jokes I pretended not to notice. I had brushed away my discomfort because I trusted him. Because that's what I believed relationships needed, trust, even when it was inconvenient. A cold, restrained numbness spread through me. The apartment we shared, the framed photos he insisted we take the rug he picked out felt suddenly artificial, like a set on a stage. As the weight of his words settled, my mind flicked back to moments I had once thought were intimate nights. He let me fall asleep while working mornings when he acted grateful for the life we were building the day I cleared his credit card debt, after he confessed he was drowning. He had cried into my shoulder and said, "You saved me, April. I'll never forget this." But now those memories felt like they'd happened to a different person, someone who didn't yet know her place in his story, was to serve a function, not hold a future. The pain should have exploded, but something stranger happened. It condensed. It sharpened. It crystallized into a cold, steady clarity that cut through the fog. This wasn't heartbreak. Heartbreak still imagines repair. This was information, clean, comprehensive information about my place in his plans. If I confronted him now, he would spin a story. He'd deny, he'd lie, he'd twist himself into the victim. He would turn it into a performance. But he couldn't perform without an audience, and I was done being one. A quiet, precise thought rose to the surface. I don't have to fight him. I just have to leave the stage. I unmuted my mic and said with a voice even I barely recognized as my own, "Yes, Mike. That should be everything. Thanks for staying late." From the living room came the rustle of a phone shoved aside. A beat later, Evan called out, casual and cheerful, "Okay, talk soon," before ending his call. I walked out of my office, feeling my expression arrange itself into something neutral, and found him sitting on the couch with a magazine he probably hadn't even opened. He looked up and offered a warm smile that might have fooled anyone else. He asked if I'd finished work, and I told him yes. I even leaned down to kiss his forehead. His body tensed before relaxing, and I wondered how often I'd missed that half second of resistance before. "Just finalizing the last few surprises for the trip," I said. His eyes lit up. He said he couldn't wait. I mirrored the smile he expected from me. Me too. Later, in the quiet of our bedroom, the mask slid off. My face went still, my breath steady, my mind sharper than it had felt in years. I opened my laptop. The glow from the screen felt like a spotlight on the truth I could no longer unhear. I navigated to the airline's website, clicked Manage Booking, and entered our confirmation number. When the page loaded, I hovered over the link beside his name. Cancel passenger Evan Rhodes. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure? For the first time in a long time, I was absolutely certain of something. I clicked yes, and with that single motion, the life I thought I was preserving quietly dissolved, making room for something far more honest. I woke before my alarm the next morning not with anxiety, but with a strange, steady calm, the kind you feel after a storm blows through and leaves the world unnaturally still. Evan was still asleep beside me, breathing softly, oblivious to the fact that the future he thought he controlled had already slipped out from under him. I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself take in the quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the decisive kind, the kind that tells you you've crossed a threshold you won't go back through. I moved through the apartment with deliberate ease. Nothing rushed, nothing frantic. I made coffee the way I always did, filled my mug, and walked back into the bedroom to get my laptop. Evan stirred slightly but didn't wake. He never woke early. I used to think it was charming how deeply he slept. Now it just felt symbolic. Once the bedroom door closed behind me, I opened my laptop again and began the work of unraveling our shared itinerary stitch by stitch. Step 1 had been eliminating his presence from the flights. Step 2 was everything else. The train reservations were first the high-speed route from Paris to Amsterdam, the scenic leg through the Alps, all the connections that tied the trip together. I opened each booking, removed passenger 2, and watched the totals adjust downward. Little notifications pinged as ticket credits and partial refunds flowed back into my account. Each digital chime felt like an exhale, like reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd given away. The hotels came next. Paris, Amsterdam, the villa in Tuscany, with the terracotta terrace he'd sworn would be perfect for sunrise pictures. I changed every reservation from 2 adults to 1. A few charged a change fee. I paid them without hesitation. Freedom, as it turned out, had a cost, and compared to what I'd already paid emotionally, these fees felt insignificant. For the non-refundable reservations, I simply changed the name to Mine Alone. If Evan showed up at a front desk trying to argue his way into a room, he'd find nothing waiting for him. His name was gone, erased as cleanly as he had attempted to erase me from his own plans. I felt no anger as I worked, not even satisfaction. It was something quieter, more exact. The feeling of filing overdue paperwork or correcting a clerical error. Necessary maintenance on a life I had neglected in the name of love. Next, I logged into the shared trip account, the savings pot I'd set up, because Evan insisted it felt adult to contribute. His contributions totaled less than 20%, but I didn't need the math to justify what I did next. I transferred exactly 50% of the remaining balance back into my personal account. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even symbolic. It was simply fair. Evan had chosen to redefine the nature of our relationship. He turned it into a transaction. I was just adjusting the ledger. Once the finances were settled, I opened a blank document and began typing a new itinerary. Not ours. Mine. A cleaner version, stripped of every compromise I'd made to match his preferences. I printed it and left it neatly on the kitchen counter next to a bowl of fruit. It looked almost domestic, almost sweet. A piece of theater he would discover hours after I was already gone. My bag had been half-packed for days, ironically, because I thought I'd need to check it for the last-minute items he always forgot. Now I finished packing in 10 minutes, taking clothes I loved, and leaving behind anything tied to memories I no longer needed. The sweater he bought last Christmas stayed. So did the cologne he claimed was our scent. I didn't want the version of me who accepted those gifts. Just after 4 in the morning, my alarm finally buzzed. Evan groaned and rolled over, facing the window. I dressed quietly, slung my bag over my shoulder, and stood in the doorway for one moment, not to reflect, not to mourn, just to confirm that the man asleep in that bed was no longer someone I recognized. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't even extraordinary enough to be one. He was simply a person who believed I was too weak to see him clearly. He was wrong. The Uber arrived at 4:30. I walked out without looking back, closed the apartment door gently behind me, and stepped into the chilled pre-dawn air. For the first time in months, maybe years, my body felt light. The airport was nearly silent at that hour. No lines, no chatter, just the rhythmic whir of luggage wheels. and the soft murmur of early travelers. I checked my bag, passed through security, and found my gate with no interruptions. Everything felt almost too smooth, like the world was rewarding me for choosing myself. I bought a coffee and a paperback novel I'd been meaning to read for months but never had time for because Evan always wanted to watch something, or go somewhere, or talk through his latest crisis. As I sat at the gate sipping my coffee, a thought settled into place. I didn't need a grand confrontation. I didn't need a dramatic exit. This quiet, uninterruptible peace was enough, more than enough. When I boarded the plane, I turned my phone to airplane mode. Not out of pettiness, out of preference. I didn't want notifications from a life I'd already stepped out of. I didn't turn my phone back on after we landed in Paris either. The RER train took me into the city, and the moment I stepped outside into the cool, gray Parisian air, I felt something inside me loosen. Maybe it was the jet lag, or maybe it was the realization that I had finally outrun a life that had been shrinking around me without my permission. It wasn't until late afternoon that I powered my phone back on. It buzzed violently in my hand. 30 missed calls, dozens of texts, their tone escalating from confusion to panic to anger. But I didn't open any of them. I scrolled, scanned, absorbed nothing, and placed the phone face down on the table of a corner cafe where I sat drinking espresso like I had nowhere in the world I needed to be, but exactly here. When the phone rang again and Evan's name flashed across the screen, I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. On the third call, I answered, but I didn't speak. His voice burst through the speaker in a frantic, disjointed mixture of shouting airport announcements and raw humiliation. "What did you do? They're saying, I don't have a ticket. The hotel says the reservation is under your name, only April. What did you do?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "I'm in Paris," I said calmly. "You should call Olivia. Maybe she can help. She has ambition." Before he could respond, I ended the call and placed my phone down gently. I didn't smile. I didn't tremble. I didn't wrap my arms around myself for comfort. I simply breathed the first full, unburdened breath I'd taken in a very long time. Paris didn't heal me. It didn't need to. All it did was give me the space to hear myself think again. That first full day, I let the city pull me along at its pace, unhurried, self-contained, and indifferent to whatever emotional catastrophe had erupted thousands of miles away at an airport. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I wasn't racing toward anything either. I was simply here. At the Louvre, I wandered without a plan. The galleries felt endless in the best possible way, each turn revealing something older, more permanent, more meaningful than anything Evan had ever made me feel. I wasn't trying to distract myself. I wasn't trying to process or find closure or reinvent my identity. I was just looking at art. And strangely, it was enough. Near the Denon wing, the crowd began to thicken the familiar pilgrimage toward the Mona Lisa. I'd always imagined I would see her the way travelers described her, underwhelming, too small, overhyped. But when I finally found myself standing before her, surrounded by a murmur of clicking cameras and softly spoken languages, something inside me stilled. She wasn't smiling out of mystery. She was smiling out of knowledge. Knowledge of what people did to each other. Knowledge of every story they brought into this room. Knowledge of how temporary our grief truly is. I raised my phone and took a picture, just me, with her blurred smile over my shoulder. I didn't pose or rehearse an expression, the way Evan always insisted on doing for our couple photos. I just captured the moment as it was peaceful, unperformed. Then I opened Evan's message thread, scrolled past the red notification bubble attached to the photo, and typed, "Thanks for the recommendations. The art is breathtaking when you're actually seeing it for yourself." After hitting send, I didn't wait to see if the message delivered. I blocked his number. This time the action didn't feel ceremonial. It felt obvious. For the rest of the evening, I walked along the Seine until the lights reflected across the water in broken ribbons of gold. The air was cool, the city was alive, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was living on someone else's emotional schedule. I ordered dinner alone at a cafe, steak frites, and a glass of red wine, and when the waiter asked if I was waiting for someone, I surprised myself by saying no, just me. There was no sting in the words, no ache, just a simple truth. Amsterdam came next, all winding canals and breezy bicycle routes. I learned to ride a rental bike without holding the handlebars, laughing out loud, when I wobbled like a child learning something new. I ate stroopwafels warm from the market and spent an entire afternoon in a used bookstore talking with the owner about 20th century novelists I had never even heard of. My phone stayed on airplane mode except when I needed maps. Notifications remained off, not out of avoidance, but out of preference. Still, the world I'd left behind tried to claw its way in. A week into the trip, as I was packing for Zurich, I noticed a voicemail icon. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was not. Part of me wanted to delete it without listening. Another part, the colder, more curious part, pressed play. "Hey, it's Tyler." His voice was strained, performing concern without believing in it. "Look, April, you need to call Evan. What you did was cruel. You humiliated him in public. He's a mess. Olivia already dumped him, obviously. He gets it okay. He knows he made a mistake. But disappearing on someone like that, that's not right. You're being petty. Be the bigger person. Call him." I stood there for a moment, holding a half-folded shirt, staring at nothing. The accusation didn't sting the way he probably intended. It didn't sting at all. Instead, I felt a wave of something close to pity for the friend who believed loyalty meant enabling for the man who believed punishment was owed to him, when he faced consequences for the world I had finally stepped out of. I called the number back. He answered on the first ring. "Oh, thank God, April. Are you ready to be reasonable?" "I'm looking at the Alps from my train window," I said. The train wasn't moving yet, but the mountains were there on the horizon. The truth was close enough. They've been standing here for millions of years. They've seen empires rise and fall. Do you think they care about airport drama? What he snapped. "Don't be a pretentious ass. This is about someone you claim to love." "I don't," I said plainly. There was a brief, stunned silence before I ended the call. Then I blocked Tyler too. The Alps were everything people said they were: vast, clean, ancient. Hiking alone with nothing but the crunch of gravel beneath my boots and the distant clank of cowbells, I felt my mind strip itself down to something simple and honest. The need to explain myself, to justify my choices, to apologize for someone else's feelings, all of it evaporated in the mountain air. One evening in the lodge, I checked my email and found one from Evan's mother. The subject line read, "A Mother's Plea." She wrote about how devastated Evan was, how much he regretted what he'd done, how love deserved forgiveness, how I seemed cold, how she hoped I would find it in my heart to call him. The phrasing made me pause, not because it hurt, but because it revealed so much, calculated and cold. Yes, that part was true. I had simply done what he did to me, only without the performance. Real tears of regret. Regret for the plan failing, or regret for losing access to the trip he'd treated like a prize. I didn't respond. I didn't even feel tempted to. I deleted the email, then joined a retired Swiss schoolteacher in the common room who taught me how to play a jazz piece on an old upright piano. We laughed when I kept messing up the same chord progression. For the first time in a very long time, the sound of my own laughter didn't feel like something borrowed. By the time the trip ended, I was sun-warmed, rested, and mentally renovated. I signed the paperwork to end the apartment lease while traveling. I moved my belongings into a small storage unit and found a modern one-bedroom near a park back home. Life became simple again. Quiet. Mine. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully articulate until then. Evan had taken up space in my life, not because he was important, but because I had built a life around making him important. Now that he was gone, the empty space wasn't empty at all. It was possibility. 2 months after I returned home, life had settled into a quiet rhythm that felt so natural it was hard to believe I had once lived any other way. My mornings started with a run through the park near my new apartment, followed by coffee at the corner cafe where the barista already knew my order. I worked from a desk by the window, sunlight stretching across hardwood floors I'd chosen myself. Evenings were simple cooking dinner, while listening to a podcast, reading a few chapters of whatever book I was into, sometimes taking a slow walk just because I enjoyed the quiet around me. There were no emotional emergencies, no dramatic sighs from the living room, no tiptoeing around someone else's moods, no mental acrobatics to preempt disappointment. Just peace, the kind that doesn't feel fragile. That Saturday, I stopped at the upscale grocery store near my place. It had become part of my weekend ritual: browse the produce, pick the ripest avocado, maybe discover a new cheese I didn't need but wanted. It was mundane and calm and entirely mine. I was comparing 2 avocados, weighing them gently in my hands, when I felt at someone staring. Not a casual glance, but a gaze loaded with recognition, hesitation, and something desperate underneath. I looked up. Evan stood at the end of the aisle, clutching a handbasket like he wasn't sure if he should approach or run. I had seen him transformed by charm before, by confidence, by calculated vulnerability. But this was different. His shoulders were slightly hunched, not in a way that suggested illness or hardship, but as if his confidence had slowly drained out through cracks he didn't know how to seal. His hair looked unstyled, his clothes wrinkled. He looked diminished. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then I turned my attention back to the avocado and tested the firmness again. Perfect. I placed it in my cart. When I looked up, he was already walking toward me. April. His voice was thin, hoarse in places. Hi. Hello, I replied, not warm, not cold, just factual. He swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the handle of his basket. You look good, really good. Thanks. I shifted my cart to let another shopper pass, stepping aside with polite efficiency. Nothing in my movements was emotional. Everything was simply practical. He exhaled shakily. I've been in hell, a real hell. His eyes darted across my face, searching for something. Anger, sympathy, nostalgia, any hint of the woman he thought he still understood. I miss you. I missed us, what we had. His voice cracked on that last part, and he cleared his throat. Can we talk just 5 minutes? Even just coffee. No expectations. I need you to know how sorry I am. I studied him, not with longing or resentment, but with a curious neutrality, like observing a stranger explain a story you had no emotional stake in. I waited for something to rise. Sadness, anger, vindication. But there was nothing. Not even a dull ache. It wasn't that I didn't feel anything for him. It was that I didn't feel anything about him. That difference mattered. I'm in a bit of a rush, I said gently, not apologizing for declining, simply stating a boundary. His face tightened. For a moment, the facade slipped, revealing the raw fear underneath. Please, April, just 5 minutes. You owe me at least. That was when I looked past him down the aisle and saw the express checkout lane opening. Actually, I said calmly, I think the line is shorter over there. He blinked. The sentence seemed to hit him in a place far deeper than an insult would have. I wasn't angry. I wasn't defending myself. I wasn't attacking him. I was simply unaffected. And that I knew hurt more than any cruel remark could have. Take care, Evan. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't check his expression. I didn't speed up or add dramatic emphasis to my steps. I just turned my cart and walked away. In the express lane, I unloaded my groceries, avocado, salmon, asparagus, lemons. The cashier scanned them one by one, the beep of each item oddly grounding. The world had become small and manageable again. I packed my bags, neatly paid, and thanked the cashier. As I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, I finally understood the exact sensation lingering in my chest. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't closure, it wasn't even relief. It was silence. A clear, uncluttered silence where my thoughts belonged entirely to me. I thought about the dinner I'd cook later. I thought about the book waiting on my nightstand. I thought about how peaceful my apartment would be when I got home. I didn't think about Evan at all. Not anymore. The walk back to my apartment that afternoon felt unremarkable in the best possible way. I wasn't floating. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't replaying the encounter in my head, trying to decode meaning or missed signals. My thoughts moved cleanly like water flowing around stones. Evan's presence in the grocery store aisle had been a brief pause in my day, nothing more. A moment of observation, not disruption. When I reached my building, I carried my groceries up the stairs, humming without noticing I was humming. Inside the apartment smelled faintly of the candle I'd lit that morning. Cedar and citrus and sunlight pooled across the kitchen counters as if waiting for me. I set everything down and started to unpack, enjoying the small domestic ritual of rinsing produce, arranging things in the fridge, laying the salmon on a ceramic plate to season later. There was no one to ask what I was making for dinner, no one to adjust the temperature on the oven after I'd already set it, no one to comment that lemon was too strong or asparagus too plain. The space was fully, completely mine. As the salmon marinated, I changed into comfortable clothes and opened the windows to let the late afternoon breeze drift through. From the park down the street, faint laughter carried upward, children playing, dogs barking, people living. It felt fitting somehow that the world went on indifferent to my story, my heartbreak, my choices, my recovery. Life didn't pause for me. It made room. Later, while the salmon baked, I sat at my small dining table reading a book I'd picked up in Amsterdam. The kind of book I never would have had the patience for before because Evan always wanted the TV on, or needed attention, or had something urgent to discuss. Now the quiet felt restorative, like a conversation between me and myself that I'd been postponing for years. Halfway through a paragraph, I paused and leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me. It struck me then, not as an epiphany, but as a gentle recognition that I had rebuilt my life without announcing it, or forcing it, or trying to prove anything. It had simply happened because I stopped clinging to someone who hollowed me out. When Evan left my life, he didn't leave a void. He left a space I filled with my own presence. I thought about the past few years, the compromises, the constant accommodation, the way I kept reshaping myself to fit whatever version of me Evan found most useful at the moment. I thought about the trip I had planned to save our relationship and how it became the catalyst for ending it. Sometimes we believe we are preserving something precious, when in truth, we are preserving something that drains us. And when we finally let it go, we rediscover how expansive our inner world actually is. When the timer chimed, I plated my meal, poured a glass of wine, and ate by the open window. Outside, the sky shifted to a muted lavender. I thought about Paris, Amsterdam, the Alps, the landscapes where my mind had grown quiet enough to hear what it needed. Yet I realized the real turning point wasn't in Europe. It wasn't the airport meltdown, or the blocked numbers, or even the calm I felt in the Louvre. The real shift happened the moment I no longer felt compelled to care about how Evan interpreted my choices. That was the moment I became free. After dinner, I washed the dishes and set them to dry. No clutter, no mess, no leftover tension from someone else's mood. I lit a candle and curled up on the couch with a blanket and my book. The simplicity of the evening felt almost decadent, not dramatic, not triumphant, just deeply, quietly satisfying. A thought drifted through my mind. Then, one that arrived without bitterness, without triumph, without any need to sting. Evan had once believed I would be devastated without him. He believed I needed his affection, his validation, his plans, his attention. But the truth was simpler. I didn't need his absence to hurt him. I didn't need to win. I didn't need to prove anything. The most potent outcome, the one he never anticipated, was that he became irrelevant. Not through malice, through my own growth. He had stopped being central to my story the moment I stopped trying to be central to his. I closed my book and rested my head against the couch, taking a slow breath as the city dimmed around me. There was no grand lesson to extract, no dramatic speech to prepare, no lingering resentment to untangle. What remained was clarity, a life I chose built on a foundation of self-respect rather than compromise. Maybe someday I would fall in love again. Maybe I wouldn't. But whatever happened next, it would happen in a life that was mine, not a life dictated by someone else's half-formed promises. For now, that was more than enough.